My name is Angela Lehmann. I am the Legislation Manager for ADP, and I'm joined today by a very special guest, John Shepherd from the ATO. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Angela. It's great to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity to come and talk about Single Touch Payroll.
Thank you, John. So today, what are we covering? We're going to do a high-level overview of what is Single Touch Payroll. A lot of you have heard the name or have some kind of context, but just help explain that to you today. Proposed rollout timeframes for businesses, how it will impact your business, what does it mean for employees, the most important of course, what does the proposed Single Touch Payroll process look like, we're going to touch on the pilot and getting STP ready. So, John, I think for some of the listeners that have tuned into some of our webinars in the past, I've mentioned that, you know, as a broader transformation agenda, the federal government is doing digital by default type projects that included SuperStream, of course, and Single Touch Payroll fits within that sort of program.
Yes, that's right, Angela. We're very keen to move on with initiatives like Single Touch Payroll. Single Touch Payroll, a key element of Single Touch Payroll is the idea of leveraging natural processes. So in this case, leveraging the natural processes that businesses use when they pay their staff and looking to see how we can actually get the information we need as part of that process, and over time reducing the need for separate reports. So a couple of key elements just to think about in terms of Single Touch Payroll. It will be about reporting your employees' salary and wages to us and their PAYG withholding amounts to the ATO each time you pay your staff, whether that's weekly, fortnightly or monthly. There's also a process in there to actually report superannuation payments when you make your super payments on behalf of your staff to the ATO as well. And there's another element around employee commencement processes. So we're really looking to, again, leverage existing information to improve and streamline that process of bringing on new staff, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a little while.
Yeah, and I guess it's important that a lot of people may or not realise that this is not just a compliance initiative. This is not the ATO trying to impose further compliance reporting. It is very much about just streamlining what the processes exist and making it a simple function for employers to meet their obligations.
Absolutely. That's, you know, one of the exciting things about Single Touch Payroll. It isn't another government initiative about a new reporting requirement. It's actually about really, at the end of the day, streamlining and making the use of information that already exists to, over time, deliver benefits to the community, in particular to businesses, to individuals, and as I said, the broader economy, by actually doing that in a way that that saves red tape and duplication.
Yeah. Okay, so this slide will lead into a bit of a flow chart for us, but at this stage we're talking phase one of Single Touch Payroll, where, as you touched on, super and pay-as-you-go information will be reported to the ATO on a per payroll event basis. So for those of you who understand this kind of reporting, at present the employer doesn't report super contributions or OTE to the ATO, so it will be a little bit of a change. And we have a diagram here which, John, we can talk through to our listeners. We've got the payslip, which still has to go to the employee. So from a tax perspective, yes, we will talk about some changes from a tax perspective, but from a Fair Work perspective and other obligations, employers are still going to issue a payslip to their employee. And of course, as per usual, the net pay will hit the employee's bank account. So where we're seeing the change is the reporting to the ATO will be payroll data that may not necessarily have been reported before or in a very different format, including the superannuation contribution data, and then payments to the ATO, which is optional at this stage. Did you want to maybe talk through a bit about that too, John?
Yeah, look, I will. And the best way, I think, to think about what we're doing at Single Touch Payroll is looking to get the level of information that you would currently produce as part of an annual payment summary. We're really looking to get that reported as part of your payroll process each time you pay your staff, whether, as I said, that's weekly or fortnightly or monthly. Essentially that would allow the information for each employee to accumulate progressively through the year. So I know some of that information is already on a payslip. It's now actually just passing that information on to the ATO, which will actually allow then us to provide that information back and visible to an employee, and particularly for employees who have multiple jobs. It gives them a chance to see an accumulated salary income and an accumulated tax position throughout the year, something that they don't currently get until they put all their payment summaries together at the end. That's
right. And we are focused on phase one, as we mentioned in the earlier slide, but there is a line there for future opportunities. John, what does the ATO see as that being the case?
Yeah, certainly once we start to get that information and get businesses reporting that information to the ATO, clearly there's an opportunity off that payroll data to meet other reporting obligations as well. Some of the common ones that employers will be familiar with, particularly larger employers, are things like surveys from the Bureau of Statistics, some of the reporting to some other government agencies that's required under health and safety legislation and other things. So there's a whole range of reporting that happens to government. This is really provides a basis initially to build on for those future opportunities.
Yeah, sounds great. Okay, so we've got to focus here on the onboarding or the implementation of a new employee to a business, and the plan is actually allowing for two different types and methods of onboarding employees. Our first method being commencement of a new employee through MyGov, and the second being through a BMS or management software of some sort, which is STP enabled, to onboard an employee. So would you like to explain a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with the MyGov solution. This really allows an employer, and this really suits, I guess, towards employers that currently follow fairly manual processes for filling out of TFN, DEC and Super Choice obligations and other employee commencement processes. This would allow an employer to invite a new employee to provide that information in MyGov, so and particularly then take advantage of all of the pre-fill of information the ATO already holds. So in the same way we pre-fill a tax, we can pre-fill your tax return as part of a My Tax process. We would look to provide the employee then with information on their super, for example, their existing super accounts that have been reported to us, which would enable them to make a choice, to pick that as a choice more easily than necessarily defaulting to a default super fund. It also allows then for making sure we get the selection of super account and details right, because they can actually pick that from a selection. Similarly on the TFN deck, we already hold most of the information that employee would actually be asked to fill in on a TFN deck. Being able to do that through MyGov again allows us to pre-fill and streamline that process, and then we can provide that information from MyGov both to fulfil the tax obligation of lodging those forms, but also to provide back to the employer to then use as part of their process. So the second option around the STP compatible software really enables those processes. A lot of larger employers already use software or payroll software as part of an onboarding process for new employees. This really tries to work with that process, not change it too much, but actually enhance it as much as possible to, again, enable that to be part of that natural process, but enhance both of those processes from an employer's perspective and employee's perspective, and certainly improve the quality of the data.
Yeah, and I guess for clients of ADP, they're used to seeing things like employee self-service. It's all online, so that would be the sort of platform they would use to do that. And I did want to say, whilst we were talking about MyGov and you talked about the fact that employees can see their super balances, we've had great feedback about how streamlined that process is and how many individuals now are using that as an opportunity to consolidate their superannuation balances, and you can see how that will fit into the broader Super Choice process as well.
Absolutely, and that particularly since we've had those super balances and rollover capability in MyGov, a lot of people do take that opportunity for a check-up on their super when they're doing their tax each year, and we see a lot of activity around consolidation at those times. Really this new commencement process is more in the prevention area, which should reduce the amount that people need to then come back and consolidate, because in the first instance they're making a good choice about where to put their super. So we think it'll save a lot of reverse workflow in the systems, including for employers at the moment who, if they don't get the forms in time, have to often actually go back and make a change
Yeah.
to where they're putting the super once the choice form comes in. We think this will actually reduce that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So we are talking indicative, but we have some timeframes here for the rollout of Single Touch Payroll. John, can you explain to everyone what that timeframe is looking like?
Yep, sure can. And look, this is building really off an announcement from the previous Small Business Minister. We had a new Small Business Minister announced yesterday, but certainly as part of the government, we had came out and announced just before Christmas that they were keen to proceed with Single Touch Payroll. And in particular, they talked about these timeframes. They said that they'd like to transition all employers with more than 20 employees to Single Touch Payroll reporting by 1 July 2018. As part of that, they announced that the ATO would be in a position to for people to start that transition and start to implement Single Touch Payroll from 1 July 2017. And we expect our systems will be available a little bit earlier than that to allow for some early adoption and really to get a good learnings out of that first introduction. In the same way we phase the introduction of SuperStream, we'll be looking to do that, build the learnings in, and then make sure that we have a smooth transition, understanding that some of the largest employers will more likely need the longest and therefore might be closer to the 1 July 2018. So they were the kind of key parts, noting that we still don't have final legislation, and certainly with the election now resolved, we expect that the government will now start to work through their priorities in terms of that, and we'll start to see that play out in the next little while, which will then give us some more certainty around these timeframes, etc. as well.
Yeah.
The other part of this timeframe, and I'll talk a bit more about the pilot later, is that the government also announced that for those employers with less than 20 employees, the government said they would like to do a pilot, or they'd like the ATO to run a pilot to really test how this might work for those, recognising the diversity of employers, of employer market, etc., that's in that under 20, and be able to really test how this might work for that group before they make any commitment to any kind of mandating of this for small business. However, it is optional if smaller businesses or those with less than 20 employees want to start STP reporting. They certainly are open to do that from 1 July next year as well.
So, how will Single Touch Payroll impact your business? So we've touched on the frequency of the reporting, moving to being in line with your payroll event. As John mentioned, it could be weekly, fortnightly, monthly, etc. It ensures a level playing field in respect of meeting obligations. So we're talking here about ensuring the transparency of meeting employer obligations across the board, John.
Yep.
And I guess, can you give everyone a bit of an example of what the ATO is trying to achieve with that?
I can, sure can. And look, just firstly, I'll cover in terms of the impact on your business. If you know, you're an existing ADP client and you're working with payroll software, if we get this right, the impact on your business should be minimal from this, because as I said, we're really leveraging all the work you already do, and just increasing the frequency. Really, you're producing a payment summary every pay cycle. So on that front, in terms of level playing field, a really clear example of that is in respect of superannuation obligations. We know that some employers do get into difficulty around the payment of the super for their employees. Often those payments aren't due and will continue to be due on a quarterly basis for most employers in that bracket. However, at the moment, that we actually aren't in a position as the administrator to actually help a business or actually provide a reminder to businesses who haven't paid their super, because at the moment that information doesn't come to the ATO. It really is just a transaction between the employer and the funds. So we often don't find out till after the end of the financial year, or unless an employee actually makes a complaint. And employees are often reluctant to make complaints against their existing employer for obvious reasons. So really, about this level playing field, what Single Touch Payroll will do is give us an indication of those that might be struggling to make those super payments much earlier, and it will allow us to get out and actually work with businesses to try and get them back on track, which means that those that have been doing the right thing and meeting obligations are competing on a level playing field with those that currently may be letting some of those things slip.
Yeah, definitely. So other considerations, you'll have to have a solution that is SBR enabled or standard business reporting, which is basically the platform, John, isn't it, that we use for the reporting? It's the same as the one we use for SuperStream.
That's right.
As we mentioned earlier, superannuation contributions or possibly ordinary times earnings will be reported to the ATO as well. As John said, that transparency gives the ATO some flexibility there. And we mentioned in an earlier slide, verifying employee details are correct against our ATO and government databases. So trying to get the data as accurate as possible. Employees. So realistically, Single Touch Payroll is largely focused on protecting the rights and entitlements of employees. So what does it mean, or how does it impact the employee? So running balances of year-to-date salary, pay-as-you-go withholding and superannuation guarantee amounts will be available on MyGov. As John mentioned, the employees can provide their TFN, withholding details and super choice via MyGov as well, all the other electronic methods we've discussed. And it gives employees comfort that their employer is doing the right thing, basically, meeting their obligations and doing the right thing by the employee. Keeping employment profile up to date. So this is always a problem, ensuring that you have the right fund documented, all the valid information, SuperStream information, tax information for your employees. Also, I think it helps shift the onus a little bit more to the employee to say, well, you know, you now have channels available to you to ensure that all that data is kept up to date. It's not always having to report back to the payroll manager and say, oh, I've changed address or I've changed some aspect of my withholding details. It gives the employee some of that onus to keep their own profile up to date as well.
Absolutely, and visibility of that through MyGov profile. Also importantly, on the employee front, the having that regular information coming to us and visible there actually allows the employee and the ATO to get a complete income and tax position. And the benefit of that we see is for things for people who are potentially working more than one job and actually claiming a couple of tax-free thresholds, or they have a HEX debt, potentially going to land themselves in a situation at the end of the year where they've got to pay in money. It'll give us the ability to actually identify that to someone early and give them a nudge to actually say you might want to rethink your withholding so that you actually don't end up with a debt or, you know, a large liability at the end of the year. So there's clearly some benefits that we see in that space for an individual to actually help them land in a more comfortable spot at the end of the year.
Yeah, agreed. So we have touched on some of this, but there's a few processes that are impacted by Single Touch Payroll. So run payroll or the ordinary running of a payroll event, we've discussed briefly, but John, it also includes, I guess, reruns, rejections and adjustments that might need to occur.
Yeah, that's right. And look, you know, one of the things that we're quite mindful of in here is that people make errors and people make mistakes in their payroll software, and clearly for particularly smaller businesses and larger businesses as well, get a lot of help as part of either external help or have people that focus on this within their business at certain times to make sure that that data is correct. You know, currently we understand that occurs mostly at the time of an activity statement lodgement and payment because there's an obligation created, or it occurs at the end of the year as part of an annual reconciliation process. So we're mindful that there needs to be processes for adjustment, but we're also practical in there that the processes we are expecting there will allow for for minor adjustments and things in the following period, rather than having to go back and correct everything in the actual pay period that it occurred. But it's this kind of regular adjustment to make sure that it actually, the overall outcome is about right, lands in the right spot.
It is good that Single Touch Payroll will have that inbuilt flexibility, I think, to be able to just move forward and correct something in the next period. You've actually touched on this already. So end of financial year, where we commonly see business clients taking their files through their accountants, they're doing reconciliations and they're finding adjustments that need to be made. So there's that process, as well as also then tying in our FBT reporting, our reportable fringe benefits, and our reportable superannuation contributions into the end of year process and reporting.
And so yes, so Single Touch Payroll will allow those end-of-year adjustments, again understanding the reality that often as part of a broader reconciliation, that's a key control process for a lot of businesses to make sure they've paid the right amount to the right employees, particularly for larger employers. And as part of that process, often adjustments are required. So Single Touch Payroll will cater for those sorts of adjustments. I think the other important point here is that we do see an opportunity here for the majority of employees who have fairly straightforward affairs, and that their end-of-year payment summary is currently made up of their 52 or 26 pays. We believe there's an opportunity to finalise all of those in the last pay run of the year, as far as Single Touch Payroll is concerned, and do away with the need for that annual payment summary to be made. So that way, streamlining and speeding up the experience for those employees who can finish up with pay 26 and then take that information as pre-fill into their tax return and get their refund for the year. So still allowing those that have got to have FBT or salary sacrifice adjusted in, they can happen as part of, be separated out and reported separately. So again, that flexibility, but the ability for most people to actually finalise their affairs in a streamlined way.
Brilliant. And I think we've already touched on the new employee process. So again, that's the MyGov solution or the software onboarding solution. So John, in this screen, we've got the ATO was kind enough to try and put the payroll process through a workflow type scenario. And I think for most intensive purposes, if we're following the blue employer line, up until we send our pay slips, then we have the chosen STP solution feeding through the report into the ATO. I guess up until there, most businesses and most people online will be familiar with that process. Can you maybe talk us through the next few steps there?
Yep, and look, I think I touched on this earlier. So for those that are in, a payroll process and using a payroll product like ADP, effectively it's all of the steps you currently do, with a couple of steps added on, and that's the step to report the data for each pay cycle to the ATO, and then we've got some processes that allow you or your agent or accountant to be able to see what's been reported. So that's that bit about the business portal, so allowing that through the tax agent portal or the business portal, that transparency of what's been reported, so that and the other bit of it at the end of here around activity statement, we're just working through that design at the moment, and we expect in the first instance we're looking at the ability to pre-fill the activity statement with the amounts from each of the Single Touch Payroll reports, but still allow the ability for the employer to make an adjustment, or the accountant or bookkeeper to make an adjustment to that amount. The amount you need to pay will still be the amount that you report on your activity statement. So we'll help with that like we do with an annual tax return. We'll pre-fill the data, but acknowledging that over time it'll take a while for that to settle down, but over time eventually move into a position where we can greatly streamline that activity statement process just by relying on your Single Touch Payroll report, but that's a little bit down the track. Yeah, exactly.
And I'm going to take this opportunity to make a point, I guess, that in the bottom there we do have a comment to say the employer BMS or other chosen STP solution is the source of truth. So again, as an employer, we are trying to make everything as simple as possible for you to streamline your processes. Just remembering though, at the end of the day, you are responsible for ensuring that the data is accurate and up to date. Just as we've seen with SuperStream, just because you have a solution, it doesn't mean that it's going to work unless the data going through the solution is up to scratch. So please just bear that in mind, that ultimately the ATO is going to rely on the fact that the payroll data is accurate coming through, and that it is your responsibility as the employer. John, we did touch on this, and it's not pilot in a production sense, it's a simulated pilot. Did you want to, I know we've pretty much touched on it, but maybe just what we're hoping to achieve with the pilot?
Yep, absolutely. I think the pilot's a great opportunity. This was part of, as I said earlier, the announcement by the then Small Business Minister about really testing the concept for smaller employers. So we're actually setting up a pilot which will start later this year, and inviting a number of software providers and developers to work with us on putting together some simulations and solutions that we can work with either their clients or some new clients on, really to show how we could make single touch payroll reporting work in the natural process of an employer's payroll process, and really focusing there on particularly understanding that there's a number of employers that don't currently use payroll software, particularly in that smaller end. So the pilot's a real opportunity to test how this could work and what kind of products would really help them to meet those new reporting obligations in a way that doesn't create a burden. So really it's a chance to be a bit innovative here, and really, rather than mandating and saying thou shalt have, everyone should just have this solution, it's a chance to actually test some different solutions, really try and find what works for, and create flexibility, I guess. So, and again, flexibility is a bit of the word here around single touch payroll. In the same way we have for SuperStream, we've really acknowledged that not one solution is going to fit all scenarios. So we're keen to actually use the pilot to evolve some new ways or new thinking here about how we can get this benefit and create more benefits in a way that works within someone's natural process. So yes, the pilot's, I think, an exciting opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and ADP's been working quite closely with your team, John, and we're quite keen to work with you on the pilot. And I guess to any ADP clients that are on the line, if you are actually keen to register your interest for the pilot, please feel free to speak to your relationship manager, and they can definitely flag you as an interested party. We can see that this is really important, and we're really grateful to the ATO for taking this consultative approach to finding out what the businesses need, and our clients, you know, we want to work with you and ensure that it's as helpful and seamless as possible. So how to get STP ready? So yes, might be a little bit premature. We still have a bit to go. Maybe more so for the larger businesses, John.
Yeah.
Just to start thinking about the fact that you will need a system that's STP compliant to send your data to the ATO. You may want to start considering what some of your business processes might look like, especially, I guess, for some businesses that don't use a specific software or outsource provider, what that might mean to your business. And most importantly, just stay in the know and stay connected. We have some channels for you through ADP, which we will actually provide links to at the end. As we've mentioned, we consult with the ATO on a regular basis, and we will be producing a solution for STP, and we can update you with that as part of our communication to you.
I think that's a key message, Angela, around particularly just being aware, looking at the different information channels. We're starting to put more information on our website as well from the ATO, but really at this stage we're still finalising some of our technical design and working closely with some of our partners in the industry to help us to do that. More starting to co-design some of these processes with businesses, and those opportunities come up as well. But start to make yourself aware, and your provider will be in touch with you to actually work you through this process. So particularly for the larger employers, as I said, those with over 20 employees, need those dates are still a while away, but we're going to work our way towards those. For smaller employers, it's really a bit of a watch this space and see how the pilot goes, and we'll be out with more information following that.
Indeed. So as part of the email you receive, post-webinar email, we have links to the ATO's website, the Single Touch Payroll area of the site. We'll have a link to the ADP blog, which you can follow. I will do regular updates in there on how STP is progressing. And we also, for clients, have a link to the Bridge, which is our online client community. So please feel free to follow any of those links. For those of you that are not clients, the blog is definitely available to you to read. But if you need any further information, please feel free to call us on 1800 000 729. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. John, thank you so much for your input today.
No, it's been a pleasure, and thanks for the opportunity to come and talk to your clients today, Angela. It's been enjoyable.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.